Happy St. Patrick's Day to all of you. Quick little factoid. Patrick was not Irish, but British, and was enslaved by the Irish. So, reveals something about our American culture, I'll be honest. Yeah, it does. And I'm not wearing green today. I'm wearing red. Do you know why I'm wearing red today? Because I witnessed a miracle last night at about 11:30 where my wolf pack answered a prayer for thousands of people for decades. It's honestly hard for me to teach today. I'm so overwhelmed with satisfaction and delight. Yes. So I could go on, but I will refrain. It's good to see you this morning. I'm glad that you're here. You have now heard this scene that Devin just read for us 3 weeks in a row. But I do have good news for you. We are heading out of the wilderness next Sunday. Though Lent doesn't end until the 28th, we will be on our way out of this scene next Sunday with the official public launch of Jesus' kingdom mission. There's a major turning point on the way next Sunday as we consider and look at the official public launch of Jesus' kingdom mission. That will set us up for Easter and the whole Easter season. I like to remind folks, Easter is not a day, Easter is a season of 50 days, followed by an exploration of clarifying what it actually means to be kingdom people. What does it mean to be kingdom people, followers of the way, people of the way? And then we will move into the ethic of the kingdom, or the ethic of the way, with the Sermon on the Mount. But before we do need to finish up not just the story of Jesus' temptations in the wilderness, but the implications and the rationale for them. Remember, Jesus is doing a couple of things here. He is reliving and recapitulating or summarizing both the story of Israel, the people of Israel, as seen specifically throughout the Torah, the story of Adam and Eve, our primordial parents at the very beginning of time, and the predicament of all humanity throughout all of time. And in the story, there are classically what have been called the three enemies of the soul, or the three enemies of the Christian life: the world, the flesh, and the devil. First week, we looked at the devil, the first week in our time in the wilderness. The second week, last week, the flesh, and today we will explore the nature of the world. But we, as followers of the way, which if you're curious about what that means and you're new to the way of Jesus, or you're just here because a friend invited you, welcome, I'm glad you're here. For us, as followers of the way, we can't just watch film, so to speak, of our own life or go over our plays. We must watch the film and go over the plays and approach of the enemy as well. We must know his strategy and scheme if we are going to resist and be counterformed. You can't just be consumed with your patterns, your behavior, your plays, so to speak. You have to have an awareness of the approach, strategy, and scheme of the evil one. The strategy of the evil one. Where will he attack you? How will he attack you? And when will he attack you? Three important questions for us to always consider. Where in your life will he come for you? Where will he seek to seduce you? How might he seduce you? How might he attack you? And when? When throughout your life have you heard or sensed the lies of the enemy most clearly? So where, how, and when? And just since being in this passage over the last few weeks, I have come to an understanding that these temptations really help frame out so much of the base sinful patterns within the human condition that show up throughout time and culture. We're able to kind of see, just in these three temptations, so much of what it means to be human, so much of the struggle, so much of the temptations that we face can kind of be reduced to what we see in this scene. And on top of that, it also helps to frame out with even greater clarity, I think, the aim of Jesus' counter-teaching as a rabbi. Remember, Jesus is coming as a rabbi. He is coming to teach us, to counter-teach us in some ways, because we have been taught, we have been formed. And so these temptations help to kind of frame out for us with greater clarity the aim of his teachings as a rabbi, of which Matthew orients the whole biography around. All of Matthew is oriented around the teachings of Jesus. So, as we move through Jesus' teachings throughout Matthew, just remember these temptations. Go back to Matthew chapter 4. Remember the wilderness moment for Jesus. There are three enemies that we face: the world, the flesh, the devil, that are seen in this story. But there are three specific temptations or three specific seductions as well. And these three clarify so much of our entire life and how we approach living as human beings. The first is the temptation of desire. Our whole teaching last week was on desire, the flesh, the animalistic-like cravings, bodily urges that we have, summarized by the question, what do you want? Strongest desire versus deepest desire, and the tension that lies in the middle. The temptation of desire. What are you hungry for? What are you after? What's your aim in life? Because I just want you all to know, friends, my deepest desire isn't to just be around people who believe the same things, but who want the same things. The second temptation in this scene is the temptation of trust. It's a relational temptation. With the question, where do you put your faith? We all are people of faith. The question is, where do you put it? Or what do you put it in? We have no choice but to put our trust or our faith into something or someone. The third is the temptation of means, or better yet, whose way will you follow? Whose way, whose approach, whose method will you follow in this life? The biblical scholar Grant Osborne suggests that each of these three temptations in the wilderness parallel the Shema prayer and command found in one of the final sermons of Moses in Deuteronomy chapter 6. I want you to see if it sounds familiar to you. Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 4 through 9 says this: Hear, O Israel. Notice the sermonic tone. The Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all of your strength. These commandments that I give you today are to be on your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. Tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Write them on the door frames of your houses and on your gates. I'm pretty sure these three very simplistic yet weighty commands are very important for the people of Israel. Love the Lord your God with all of your heart, your will, your desires, your affections. Love the Lord your God with all of your soul, with your whole life, all that you are, with trust. And love the Lord your God with all of your strength, or the Hebrew idea is that of muchness. And have you noticed as we have read this story, the scriptures that Jesus uses as rebuttals to the temptations? Passages from Deuteronomy 6 and 8. And what will Jesus soon call the greatest commandment in all the Torah? The Shema. Love the Lord your God with all of your heart, soul, mind, and strength. So what do you want? Question of desire. Where do you put your faith? Question of trust. And whose way will you follow? It's a question of means. These are, I think, the foundational questions of being human. No matter if you're religious or not, you ask these kinds of questions implicitly, or your life answers these questions, whether you know it or not. The key for us is to narrow the gap between what we say or what we believe and how we live. Because ultimately, what we are after is a changing of the way in which we live. These are fundamental and foundational questions on the road of life, or better said, on the way. Desire, trust, and means. Your wants, your allegiance, and your method of achieving the good life. Do you want the good life? How do you get there? Do you want your desires met? What are they? How might they be met? Do you want to have relationality, belonging, and a sense of trust that people will be there for you and you will be there for them? Reciprocity, mutuality. Questions of being human. Not just religious questions. And keep in mind that Jesus will achieve the ultimate outcome of all of these. His desires will be met. His life will be saved by trusting in Yahweh's vision. And he will rule over the universe. The issue is the way of achievement. Self-actualization or self-surrender. That's the question for all of us. Self-actualization or self-surrender. Rebellion or obedience. Autonomy or dependence. You know the hardest thing for us often to say is, I need help. I don't know the way. I'm lost. I'm sick. Do you know how often I try to lie to myself and say, I'm not sick? Jordan's like, you're hacking a lung, man. You sound terrible. You look pretty rough. And you have snot coming out of your nose. I'm not sick. Okay, well, you're living in denial. It's hard for us to, quote unquote, go to the doctor. It's hard for us to say that we need help. But I also want to make this observation in the text, something that really hit me this week that I've never noticed before. Consider the immediacy of the enemy's offers. You can turn stones into bread now. You can jump now, and you'll be lifted up. Bow down now, and you can have the kingdoms of the earth. No. Do you know what this is? This is a Ponzi scheme. It is a get-rich-quick plan. An attempt at instant gratification. The enemy is essentially saying you can bypass the process and get the product that you want. In the second temptation, look where he is. On top of the temple in Jerusalem. The highest point, 200 feet in the air, in the largest city in the region. The epicenter of Jewish influence. The epicenter of his whole culture. And a people who have been desperate for a divine Messiah for hundreds and hundreds of years. He takes him to the top of the temple in Jerusalem. He's not in Galilee hanging out by the sea in obscurity. He takes him to the top of the temple, the place of influence. The enemy is trying to give Jesus the quickest ticket to stardom, the quickest ticket to celebrity status, the quickest ticket to a platform. He is trying to make Jesus a show. Just consider how many people would be around the temple courts. And he's like, jump. Yahweh will save you. He is wanting Jesus to become a spectacle, man. A show. But Jesus isn't a show. He is a suffering servant who saves. He is not a show, but a suffering servant who saves. Pastor Charlie Dates says, knowing God may not make your life comfortable, but it will make it supremely meaningful. There is meaning in the trials and troubles that you faced. The enemy is trying to provide a quick ticket to what Jesus ultimately wants by making it comfortable, but hollow of meaning. You can't bypass the process, dear friends. There is no quick ticket in the way of the kingdom, as we will soon see. There's no quick ticket in life. There is no Disney Fast Pass, which has a cost, does it not? There is no same-day delivery in the way of the kingdom. We struggle with the idea of the long obedience in the same direction in a culture seeking instant gratification. We want it now. We want immediacy. We want it in the mail by 4 o'clock this afternoon, at our door, in our mailbox. That is the opposite of the way of the kingdom. It's a long journey of transformation. When you respond to the invitation to follow Jesus, it is for your lifetime. It is for the entirety of your life. Some of you think you've been following Jesus for a long time. You still got a long ways to go. I've been struck recently by Psalm 84:5, and some of you know this. I've been going back to it over and over again. It's been deeply prophetic for me, I think, in my life. And it just says, blessed are those whose strength is in the Lord, whose hearts are set on pilgrimage. And I was struck by that because we love the journey motif. I love the journey motif too. We love the journey motif in culture as well. However, pilgrimage goes a step further. Pilgrimage is based on the destination, where you're heading, the telos. It's a sacred journey that is forming you as you go along towards this sacred space. And we aren't just on a journey, but we are on a pilgrimage as a people towards Zion, towards the presence of God, towards the telos of glorification. Pilgrimage is sanctification. We're not just on a generic journey, wandering at Lake Brant. We're on pilgrimage to the most manifest presence of God. Pilgrimage to new creation. There is no quick ticket. There is no fast pass. There is no same-day delivery. Edwin Friedman, who I've referenced a few times, was a family therapist and a family systems theorist, notates this desire for immediacy as one of 5 marks of a chronically anxious and emotionally regressed society. I have mentioned one before, that being blame displacement, pointing of the finger. Another mark is what he calls a quick fix mentality. It's a mark of an emotionally regressed society and chronically anxious system, whether in the family unit or in organizations and institutions. He says this, he says, our society is averse to pain, and instead of looking for long-term, holistic, altruistic solutions, he's not Christian, we often desire instant gratification to remove immediate pain. These are all characteristics of chronic anxiety and can be found in most institutions in the United States, in both its leaders and followers. He says we often seek mere symptom relief rather than fundamental change. Relief becomes more important than renovation. We just keep patching the roof. Patch the roof. I gave into what might be a Ponzi scheme. And that is, I bought these ultrasonic little plug-ins for bugs. You know what I'm talking about? The blue lights? You plug in, they're all over our house, man. We live in the woods. So I'm trying to scare these bugs off. And I have come to realize that all they really do is they just kind of mask the actual situation at hand. The situation is that we got a lot of bugs. And we live in the woods. And they're just providing a little bit of symptom relief for short periods of time. Because there are plenty of moments where I see stink bugs all in my bathroom. Anybody seeing stink bugs this time of year, man? Whoo, yes. We've all done this before, right? We see an advertisement. If you buy this product, man, it's all going to get better. Guess what you do? Calling 1-800, whatever that number is, and you order that thing. You know, we all do this. This is going to fundamentally change my life. My parents bought an ab lounge about 20 years ago because they were going to get fit. That ab lounge turned into basically a new sort of laundry room with clothes all over it. We like quick fixes, man. We like quick fixes. We would prefer symptom relief rather than fundamental change. Selah, right now, in our home and in our life, is obsessed with Band-Aids. Obsessed. Some of you with children that are, 2, 3, whatever, 4, are obsessed with Band-Aids. You know what I'm talking about. Everything needs a Band-Aid. Everything needs a Band-Aid. But usually she needs Band-Aids from not using her listening ears. Selah hears listening ears language a lot right now in our home. And in a quick fix mentality, Band-Aids have a higher value than better decisions. We'd rather have hard falls with Band-Aids than make hard choices, not to climb up on top of a chair or on top of the couch. Band-Aids don't heal, man. They don't heal. I'm not saying they're not needed, they're needed, but they don't heal. What we need is deep transformation, not just symptom relief. We don't just need a quick fix. And following Jesus, if you are curious, is not a quick fix invitation. It's a long process of sculpting, shaping, molding, and renewing. The poet W.H. Auden had this to say. I thought this was beautiful. He says, "We would rather be ruined than changed. We would rather die in dread than climb the cross of the moment and let our illusions die." This was from a poem in 1947 called Age of Anxiety. And he won a Pulitzer Prize for this long poem. We would rather be ruined than changed. Is that you? Is that you? Verse 8 and 9 says, "Again, the devil took him," being Jesus, "to a very high mountain." I have a picture for you guys to see the mountain of temptation as tradition refers to it. Just outside of Jericho. Supposedly, this is the place where the enemy took Jesus, and there's a monastery there on the mountainside. And it's at this place where the enemy shows Jesus all the kingdoms of the world and their splendor. I want us to notice a couple things briefly. I'm not going to go deep into this specific temptation, but just consider the trajectory. It says the devil took him to a very high mountain. The way of resurrection, though, is actually down, not up. And he's trying to get him as high as possible, as quick as possible. To go high. Remember, he took him to the top of the temple. He asked him to consider turning stones into bread. You know, the original language for bread actually connotes the idea of rising. But there's only one way for resurrection, and it's actually through death, through the cross. The second thing I want you to consider is the word showed. The visible nature of this moment, the connection to sight and vision, something Jesus is going to give time to in the Sermon on the Mount, the role of the eyes in our life's formation. What you are looking at, you become. What you give your attention to, you become. The third piece here is I want you to consider the word splendor. The Greek word is doxa, or as the translation that Devin read, the English word is glory. Splendor or glory. Again, the seducer is trying to woo him, attract him with a sort of counterfeit beauty, a sort of plastic beauty, a cheap beauty. But at the end of this moment, remember, Jesus says to worship the Lord your God only. And I mentioned last week how it's in our worship that our heart is curated. To worship means to lay on the ground. But in the Hebrew text, as he's quoting Deuteronomy, the idea of worshiping is usually translated by the word fear. Fear the Lord your God only. And the word fear in the Hebrew also can mean to be in awe of or to revere. In other words, you should be so captivated by the majesty of God that all other earthly splendors can't compare. Can't compare. There's a vast difference between standing on top of a mountain in the Rockies and standing on the hill in my backyard and going, this is beautiful. Whoa. I'm not saying it's not good. I'm just saying there are levels and degrees of objective beauty that produces awe and splendor. And guess what? The philosopher Dietrich von Hildebrand says, reverence is the mother of all virtues. If you don't revere God or find yourself in awe of God, then you won't follow God. You won't follow in the way. You won't be committed to the way. We have to be in all. So, here in this third temptation, he is offering him the kingdoms of the world. He says, all this I will give you if you bow down and, as I said, worship me. There's the temptation to worship. In other words, I will give you my authority, my jurisdiction, my dominion, if you worship me. That's what he's saying. What a curious juxtaposition. You thought about that? Consider the juxtaposition of the offer. I will make you prince if you make me king. I will give you everything if you make me your everything. I will make you a winner if you forfeit the game. If you forfeit the game, you can come on my team and be a winner. Interesting juxtaposition. What's Jesus giving up? What would he give up? What the enemy is offering Jesus is a gaining of the whole world, but a forfeiting of his soul. Andy Crouch, who writes a lot on culture and technology specifically, he says, idols at first give you everything and ask nothing, and then ask for everything and give you nothing. The psychologist David Benner, in his book, The Gift of Being Yourself, which we actually have in our bookstore, says, trying to gain more than the everything God offers, we end up with less than nothing. I don't want to convince you today. I just want you to consider the proposal. When Jesus, in Matthew 16, speaks of gaining the world but losing your whole soul, it's in the form of a question. And so I would just ask you, what does it profit you to gain the whole world but to lose your soul? When we seek to gain more than everything God offers, we end up with less than nothing. So, in summation, the devil, the Satan, is the accuser who seeks to seduce us with lies. Our flesh is made up of the disordered desires, the animalistic-like cravings, usually that we live reactionarily to, that actually enslave us, that are contrary to the spirit that empowers us to transcend our bodily urges and the desires of the flesh. And the three primary questions the enemy tests and tempts us in are, what do you want? Where do you put your faith? And which way will you follow? All of which are prefaced by a performative sense of proving your identity, legitimizing your identity. I'm going to confess something for you guys this morning, or to you guys. Yesterday, I had a moment where I was at a birthday party for my nephew, and I was meeting someone for the first time. We were talking, exchanging, dialogue, conversation, and I shared something with that person. And afterwards, I thought to myself, "You only shared that to get attention. You only shared that to perform." It was a tough sense of conviction, I'll be honest with you. This is the first time I've shared it out loud. I haven't even told Jordan. Here you go, babe. I did, almost immediately, the Lord was like, you just shared that because you wanted to be legitimized. Let me tell you, some of us do things consciously and unconsciously to get attention. You don't need it. You've got it. We do things to be seen temporarily, but you're seen eternally. You're seen. You're valued. You have dignity. I can't say that enough. You do not need to perform your identity. I felt that conviction myself. So he prefaces these with this sort of questioning of the stability of Jesus' identity, and this whole scene is scented with a quick fix like Ponzi scheme. Here is the stratagem of the devil. Lies, playing to our disordered desires, asking us these questions, tempting us in these questions, good questions questions that Jesus actually fulfills, undergirded by this sort of perform your identity, if that's who you really are, scented with a quick fix like Ponzi scheme. You tracking with me? But what about the world? What about the world? Remember what the devil offers Jesus. He offers him the quote-unquote kingdoms of the world. Jesus in John chapter 12, verse 31, calls the devil the prince, or the ruler, or the commander, the first in rank of this world. So the devil has authority. He has a degree of rulership over this world. He's not in total control, but he has control. 1 John chapter 5, verse 19 says, the whole world is under the power of the evil one. I, like the NASB, says the whole world, the evil one has power, and it lies in the evil one. It rests in the evil one. I like that the word lies is in the NASB. I think that's an interesting way of putting the word lies in there. The world as we know it has multiple meanings, okay? The first is it can mean the created universe, the material world, the earth, or whatever is beyond the earth, the universe. It can also mean our humanity, all humanity as one whole. But here it is in reference to the systemic order of sin and the standardization of deceitful ideas of the devil, where the deceitful ideas of the devil become systematized, producing, ultimately, a disordered world. And secularism is an attempt at a world operating without God. And we find ourselves in the rise of secularism. Let's operate as if God doesn't exist. The Greek word for world is the word cosmos. Can you say that? Cosmos. And it means order, arrangement, or makeup. Consider the word cosmetic. My best friend, John Mark Comer, in his New York Times best-selling book, Live No Lies, says that the world is a system of ideas, values, morals, practices, and social norms that are integrated into the mainstream and eventually institutionalized in a culture corrupted by the twin sins of rebellion against God and the redefinition of good and evil. The world is what happens when Adam and Eve's sin goes viral and spreads through a society. And because we are social creatures, we create societies. And because we are creatures of imitation, certain behaviors, beliefs, and ideas become solidified. In turn, those solidified norms also create us. There is upward causality and downward causality. In sociology, this is called socialization. We are all socialized by the norms that are concrete in our culture or appear to be objectified, so to speak. The sociologist Peter Berger says there can be no social reality apart from man, yet it may also be stated that man is a product of society. And the primary channel of socialization in our time is what? Media. Media. Historically, influence was through teaching and through coercive power. In our time, it's through a form of what's called soft power, or media, advertising, Facebook, Instagram, the algorithm, TikTok, which has had a very controversial week. Right? Why? Because it does something to us. Bipartisan agreement, by the way. Okay? Which is rare in these days. It's doing something to us. The Korean philosopher Byung-Chul Han says, for human beings to be able to act freely, the future must be open. However, big data is making it possible to predict human behavior. It's the world shaping us. Consider a yawn. If I yawn right now, at least half of you would yawn. Or laughing. Have you ever been around someone who's laughing at something and you just start laughing because they're laughing? And you're like, why are you laughing, man? You're just dying hysterically. You're not even laughing at the object they're laughing at. You're laughing at them for laughing, and you don't even know why. Creatures of imitation. I'm wearing baggy jeans because Gen Z rules the earth right now. Some of you are like, why has he got baggy jeans on, man? I gave in to the mimetic desire. Hey, you're not that unique. You are unique, but you're not that unique. You're unique because God created you, not because you are expressing yourself, because the way you express yourself actually looks a lot like the way the world expresses itself. Due to this social phenomenon, patterns of sin, both ideologically and ethically, and both ideologically and ethically somehow form us in ways in which we don't even know how. We are catching these ideas. They're not explicitly taught, but they are caught. This is what's called social contagion theory. You do things because you saw someone else do it. You believe things because you saw someone else believe it. Your timeline is shaping you, man. Your reels that you watch are shaping you. Behaviors, emotions, or conditions are spreading spontaneously throughout our society. So what might we call this? We call this unintentional spiritual formation. We're all involved in spiritual formation, religious or not. And it's happening to us unintentionally. So when this happens, sin becomes systematized. And when this happens, order becomes disorder, the garden becomes wilderness, and cosmos becomes chaos. And here's the great trap as we begin landing the plane. You laughed because you're like, he's going to go 10 more minutes. Here's the great trap. We consciously assume that the majority is always right. The flesh says, I want that. And the world says, everyone's doing it. How many times were you like 11 and your mom and dad are like, you need to stop doing that? You're like, but Mom, everyone's doing it. How many of you had FrostWire or LimeWire back in the day? Confess it, confess it. I did. All those hands, stealing music. But everyone's doing it. And the Lord came back on us because it crashed my computer like twice. Lies always destruct, my friends, including hardware and software. Postmodern ethics can be summed up this way from Renee DiResta, who's a Stanford research manager at the Internet Observatory. What a job. She says, you make it trend, you make it true. She calls this computational propaganda. You make it trend, you make it true. If it's trendy, does that make it true? If it's a fad, is it a fact? She wrote a book called Invisible Rulers, The People Who Turn Lies into Reality. Not Christian. But as Eugene Peterson says, crowds lie. The world lies. In crowds, the truth is flattened to fit a slogan. Not only the truth spoken, but the truth that is lived is reduced and distorted by the crowd. The crowd makes spectators of us, passive in the presence of excellence or beauty. The crowd makes consumers of us, inertly taking whatever is pushed on us. And who did Peter succumb to the night of Jesus' arrest? He succumbed to the crowd and the power of imitation, the gravitational pull to the herd. Who crucified Jesus? The crowd, the world. And as we will see, there is a stark contrast between the crowd and the disciples, the multitude and the few, the kingdom of heaven and the kingdom of the world. So, if this is how we are unintentionally formed by the teacher of the world, systematized, consumerism, rampant, political idolatry, nationalism, individualism, you can go through all the isms, forming us, shaping us, tribalism, materialism, all of it. If these are the ways that we are being formed unintentionally, what do we need? We need a new teacher, and we need intentional formation. We need a reordering, a repentance. The world may be here, but as we will begin to see next week, the kingdom of heaven is near. Let's pray.